I bought this helmet for primarily two reasons. The first one is the Aero gains. It's meant to be one of the fastest helmets on the market, and we'll go into some of the data later. Secondly, it looks kind of like a normal helmet. You don't look as goofy as you would with something like that POC helmet. I'll overlay an image now so you can see it. Yeah, you can just use it as a normal road bike helmet. But let's ask some other questions. Is it comfortable? How easy and how well does it hold the glasses in the garage here? Does it look good? Is it aero? And finally, does it ventilate the air well? Does it keep your head cool? Let's find out. All right, let's kick the conversation off with weight. And this one comes in at about 260 grams. I have the small version here, which should be a little bit lighter. For a full-on aero helmet, I don't think that's too bad. And when the weight is on top of your head and you're moving your head around all day and stuff and you're cycling, if it's over like 300 grams, I find you do start to notice it. It's obviously not like this helmet here, the POC Ventral Light. This is 180 grams. This thing's an absolute feather. But yeah, as I said, you can literally ride around all day with this thing on your head and you're gonna be just fine. It feels pretty good to do so. Alrighty, aerodynamics, which is the main reason why you would buy the Socialized Evade 3. And realistically, for my own testing, I can't do any testing that's going to be accurate enough to determine whether this helmet is faster than this helmet, although it will be. But thankfully, some other people have done a lot of work for me, and that is Cycling News. So Cycling News basically did their own mega tests of like 15, 20 different aero helmets, and the Socialized Evade 3 comes in at number 2. Sits in right behind the POC Pro Sen, which, to be quite frank, you would never catch me dead in that helmet. It looks terrible and it looks like a time trial helmet. Whereas this, I mean, it's long and it's elongated, but it still looks somewhat like a normal real helmet, which is good. The way they tested it is they just had the rider holding the exact same normal riding position on top of the hoods, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a moment. But to come second place, that whole thing is pretty impressive from this thing because it has got quite a lot of ventilation, which I'm also going to talk about a bit later. So if you're comparing it to a helmet like this, which like I said is designed to be as light as possible and as airy as possible, over 40 kilometers at like 40 k's an hour, this thing is going to be about 55 seconds to a minute quicker than this guy, which is a massive difference. Now, realistically, can you feel that whilst you're riding? No, not really. The numbers are too small to feel that speed gain. But in the normal riding position, a whole minute faster than this, pretty impressive. There were a lot of other helmets on there. I'm going to put like a quick list on there now so you can see which other ones are on there. That came far below this thing, and they are meant to be aero helmets as well. The thing is, like I said, they tested it in the normal hoods position. They didn't test it in the dropped position. And I actually think a lot of the aero helmets would have come a lot closer to this thing if you were in that dropped aero position. And really, that's how I think this thing's designed to work in, because it's got that really long tail on it. I think it's designed to fill in that gap between the head and the neck and the shoulders when you're in the aero position. So aero testing in that position might have been more accurate, although usually you can only spend about 10 to 15 minutes in that kind of position and you get tired and you probably come back up to the normal position. So it's nice to know that this helmet works in the normal position. So yeah, even if you're riding normally, it doesn't seem like much, but this helmet probably will make you faster over long periods of time. And that's just the time gain over a 40 kilometers, like 55 seconds. If you add that to a 160k ride, a 100 miler, you're going to save a lot more time indeed, or a lot more energy for the same speed. The glasses garage, how well does it sit in the helmet? And I can confirm that it sits very well in the helmet. The reasons you might want to take them off and stick them in here, well, you might be climbing, your face might be getting hot and you're sweating, you just want a bit more air to the face. Second of all, maybe it's raining, the opposite, and you can't quite see, there's too much water beating up on the glasses and you want to just see with your own eyes, so you want it to be stable in there. You've got to be shaking these things pretty damn hard for them to fall out, which is very good. One thing I do recommend is having them in this way because it gets a lot closer to the helmet, it's a bit more stable, rather than having them in this way. They just sit a bit further out and it kind of sits a bit lower to your eyes. Although if the sun's quite low, it might be nice to have that shade still, but it is more stable when the glasses are upside down. Okay, the glasses are nice and stable when they're in the helmet, but what about putting them on and off? I can confirm with two hands, it's a breeze. You can just find the holes on the lower section here and it's very easy. But what about one hand? Well, I'm gonna have to film and try and show you. I always try and find the side with the hand first because that's easier. And once it's wedged in there, then I try and go for the other side and oosh, no problem at all. And then, so you can do it without taking both hands off the bar. It's only a small thing, but it makes the functionality of the helmet much better. Does this helmet have a jerry gap? And for me, it does. So if you don't know what a jerry gap is, it's basically the gap between the top of your glasses and the bottom of the helmet. And the maximum acceptable distance is 0 millimeters. Unfortunately for me, this helmet does have a bit of a gap for me. I can push it down and tighten it up. It's fairly snug, but sometimes after a little while it starts to ride up a little bit and the gap starts to increase again. It's just a looks thing, might not matter to you. I quite like it better when there's a smaller gap between the glass and the helmet, just something aesthetic. Adjustability on the helmet, thankfully it's got all the adjustable parts that you'll ever need. You can go forward and backwards with them, so you can make sure it's always sitting underneath your ear. You can't adjust the height of these, but where they sit and rest, they sit really comfortably. The POC ones, you can't adjust the height either, but they sit on top of the earlobe, but these sit nice and comfortably below. Of course, you've got your normal twist lock on the back here, which is nice and adjustable. You can get it nice and snug, and it is comfortable on the back of the head, and you can adjust the height of this as well, so you can have it higher up on top of your head or lower down. Personally, I prefer it lower down on my head, as I just find that a little bit more comfortable and it feels a little bit more locked in. When it comes to cleaning this thing, it is matte, so it's a little bit harder to clean than a gloss helmet, but I find a baby wipe does just work just fine still. I tend not to ride it through the UK winters because, well, then you have a lot of work to do to get it clean again afterwards, but through the summers you're just fine, and yeah, baby wipe works fine over most of this helmet. In terms of the straps, I've got the white version here, and thankfully they come as grey. I got this POC one here, and you can see they came as white straps, and well, they're not white anymore, they're permanently yellowed from the sweat. But the grey straps, they'll hold up just fine. Also, you can unvelcro the padding inside. The padding isn't the most comfortable in the world, but it works well. It's easy enough to remove. You can just stick it in the washing machine and, well, keep the hygiene well on your forehead. Maybe stop you getting some forehead spots after those long rides. And in fact, I find this a lot easier than some other helmets because it has a plastic backing, so it holds its shape better, making it easier to put it back into the helmet. What about my long-haired friends out there that like to have a bun or a ponytail at the back? Well, until recently, I did have long hair, and there's a big gap out the back here. Most helmets will come like this, where it's got a very small gap in there and it's quite hard to pull the hair through. But no, this one's got a very large gap, making it very easy to get your head in there with long hair. Tough climb into the headwind today, and like I say, at lower speeds, I don't think the helmet performs as well, especially when you start to heat up. I think part of it might be because I've got my sunnies covering a lot of the holes in the front there, because when you get hit from the side winds and the tailwinds, you can feel the air come through the helmet. Maybe it's better to flip the glasses upside down and have more air go through. But yeah, I think ventilation works better at high speeds on this thing, as you would expect from an Aero helmet. So yeah, I wouldn't say the helmet at all feels like it overheats when you're climbing, it just feels normal. But as the speed starts to get back over 20-25 kilometers an hour again, it does feel like a very well ventilated helmet. This is where it really comes into its own. And I would say it feels like a regular helmet, which is quite admirable for a Aero helmet to feel like a normal helmet in terms of ventilation when you're going fast. So comfort. Yes, the comfort is good on this. I would say it's on par with about the POC helmets. When it's on my head, I really don't think about it ever, which is kind of the sign of if a helmet's comfortable enough. I wouldn't say it's plush like the casque helmets. When I put them on my head, I find they really are like soft and plush, and you can really forget about them. Not quite so with this one, but like I said, it's more than good enough to be riding in for 8-10 hours a day, even for those kind of times and distances. There's no areas where it digs in, and like I said, the adjustability on the back and stuff, it sits in snug places, but it sits in areas where there's no chafing, no rubbing, no digging in spots. All right, finally, safety. The main reason why you wear a helmet really. Is this helmet safe? Well, does come with a 5-star rating from the Virginia Tech Helmet Rating Test Lab. I'm not totally familiar with the Virginia Tech Test Lab, but they do seem to cover a lot of sports, so I guess I'll trust it. And it does also come with MIPS. So if you don't know what MIPS is, it basically reduces the rotational forces on the head, should keep you a little bit safer. There is one thing that I think about. It is a very skinny helmet, obviously for the aerodynamics, which means your ears kind of sit right on the edge of the helmet. And if you hit something, you'll dent the helmet a little bit, and you probably will scuff your ears a little bit. Now, I know it's not the end of the world, but something to consider. As with this helmet, it does stick out a bit wider, and it does protect the ears a little bit more if you went over. Hopefully it doesn't happen for me and doesn't happen for you guys. Finally, the price in the UK, this comes in at around £220. Not a cheap helmet, that's what you can buy it for at the moment. For 120 quid, this is an absolute steal in terms of comparison to other Aero helmets. When it's about 220, it's about a fair price. It does come in other colours. You can get a red version, you can get a colourful backed version here. I like plain white, I think it looks the best. But once again, price is very subjective. It's up to you if it's going to be worth the money, if that 220 quid is worth a little bit more speed. I think for a lot of us that, well, like to spend a bit of money on bikes, probably is worth that cash if you're buying a helmet anyway. Well, there it is, guys, the Socialized Evade 3. I think as a whole, a very good helmet. Not much ventilation at those low speeds, but because there's quite a lot of space on the side here, you can feel the air go through the helmet when you get a side wind, and does work better at high speeds. There is airflow that can get through to the back of the helmet there. But what do you guys think? Have you had a bad experience with this thing? I can personally recommend it, especially if you're looking to go a bit faster on the bike and you need to buy a new helmet. But if you have any specific questions, you can always ask me in the comments below. I reply to most things, or you can find me over here on Instagram. I've been Jason. This has been Cycling Unboxed. I'll see you in another video.